Are some tricks that can be done on flat impossible to do on stairs? Let's figure it out. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel all about skateboarding in all of its forms and every form of media I can find it in. Today I'm answering your questions. I've got a handful of them that were all submitted by going to radratvideo.com. The first one is from Public Carrera, who has a few questions. Would you rather triple your bag of skate tricks, but every bail, no matter how small, would feel like credit carding, or have the consistency of the skate series, but only be able to push Mongo and have all of the disadvantages, joys, that come with that, times 10? Okay, I would say always have to push Mongo, because I could do anything. Like the consistency of the skate series, you don't really bail tricks. You just might do the wrong one sometimes. You know, if you're trying to do, if we're not talking about a combo anyway, if you're trying to do a 360 flip, you'll either do a 360 flip or a 360 shove it. You know, there's no bailed 360 flip where you didn't catch it right or whatever. So like, I could just do a line that's basically endless, and I could trying to get into a grind, miss the coping sometimes, or like, you know, fail to lock in just right, or don't finish the whole flip before I land in the manual. I would still bail sometimes, but I wouldn't really have to. I could cruise around and do basics endlessly. Having to push wrong all the time would be tough. It'd be embarrassing, especially because you would also do it switch. So you can push with both feet. It's just never the right one at the right time. But you could get around that if you film by just doing lines without pushes. You know, like if it's at a skate park, do a trick, you know, you push and then the clip starts, then you do a trick into the bank or grinding, and then you carve around here and you kick turn, and then you do something down these stairs or something like that. You don't necessarily have to push in every line, and you don't have to in clips for sure if it's just individual clips. So like most people wouldn't know that I did that. You know, like the people who would actually physically see me in person would know. But if I was uploading to the channel and I was like, oh, here's a bunch of clips from this summer, you'd never know that I pushed the wrong way throughout all of them. So I picked that one. All right, next question from Gnarly G Turner. Hey Rad, if you had the chance to spend an afternoon with a pro, who would you like to meet, and what would you ask him, or what would you do together? Having a coffee and talk, or go skate? I would meet Rodney Mullen and go on roller coaster rides together eating cotton candy. By the way, do you think we will ever see footage from him again? Oh, would we ever see footage from him again? I don't think so. Nothing substantial. I don't think we'll ever see a part from him again. We might see a couple of clips, you know, at most. I don't think he's going to do a part. I think he could still have one in him, but I don't see him doing it. It'd probably have to be freestyle now. Getting a bit older, he could still do some street, but I know he had like hip injuries and stuff like that. I don't see him having another like a street video part in him, but I would pick him too, because I would just like to hear his stories. For me, it would just be hanging out and having some drinks and just talking about like the thought process of stuff and like how he came to certain things and what things were like back in the day. One thing that I have thought about, I made a series of videos on who invented the hard flip, and there's not even a solid answer, but there's some really good candidates on that. But there was somebody in there, I can't remember who it was, but he invented the Nollie 360 hard flip in his head, and he couldn't actually land it. And he did this because he was picturing a tray flip. So like you scoop this way and you flick this way. You could do the exact same thing, but your front foot is doing the scooping and your back foot is doing the flicking, and it flips kind of the same way if you ignore the direction that the pop is. Like if you just consider the flat flip of it, it does the same thing as a 360 flip. So that's how he like came up with this idea, and it was one of the guys who may have come up with the hard flip. And I wonder what tricks that were invented like in his head that he was never able to land. I think that would be a really interesting question to ask. Because maybe they were eventually done by someone else. Maybe they didn't end up being possible. But I think that would be a cool thing to pick his head about. Hey Rad Rat, longtime fan here. I was watching Jaws' Biggest Drops Ever, and I saw that on most of the lands his hands touched the ground from absorbing the impact on big gaps. Do you think it should still count as a land? I'm personally insulted and frankly offended by seeing them touch the ground with their hand when they land, and I think it's disrespectful to skateboarding as it comes across as bad form. From Jeff. I mean, it's bad form, technically, but it really depends on the severity of it, you know? It's like a toe touch, I think. But if like a little bit of your shoe brushes the ground because you land and you had to turn a little bit and your foot just kind of briefly touched and that was it, versus like just the tip of your heel is on the board and your whole foot's down on the ground. It's kind of the same thing with your hands. When you're doing something that big and you absorb all the impact, your hands come down. They can't not. And so if they just kind of touch the ground or you kind of like do this and kind of like push off slightly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And to me, it's like, it shows how hard that was. You can't just land like this. You have like you have to do whatever you got to do to stay standing. So I don't have a problem with that. But if you like land and you got to like kind of do this with both hands, then slowly push back up, then yeah, you've absorbed some of the impact with your hands and it doesn't count. So I feel like you maybe exaggerated your stance on that slightly, but yeah, there's a line. Try not to, but you know, a mild touch isn't that big of a deal. The next question is from Dad, somebody's dad. I saw Nyjah pull off a caballerial big spin flip in the battle at the barracks a few days ago. The trick is a pretty insane one to do in a skate battle, and there are probably a lot of skaters who can't land that kind of trick ever. Of course, people don't fear trying things like that on flat ground because the consequences of falling aren't as dire as doing tricks downstairs. But this got me thinking, in your opinion, are there just some tricks that some people can and never will be able to do down stair sets? Are there some that we will never even see be attempted? I mean, tricks we will never see from a physics standpoint and just being impossible to keep track of the board and the trick regardless of the threat of slamming. So speaking of your trick specifically, it wasn't fakey, but Yoshi Tannenbaum did a gazelle flip downstairs into a bank and a cab flip. So there are some things that are more possible than we think. For example, Jeff Dustyyshellz, asked him how to pronounce his name, and I had it written down. I just saw him do a triple flip down a bunch of stairs, and he does that kind of thing all the time, but I just recently saw him do it. And at one point, I would have said that probably wasn't possible, because like down a couple foot drop, sure, down like 10 stairs, the idea that you would do a triple flip, like you got to be consistent enough to do something downstairs at speed. Like it's super risky to do like a crazy trick like that and use up that whole airtime with flips. It's hard to imagine. It would have been until he started doing all this stuff. It was hard to imagine doing that type of thing. But he can do that. So I was thinking, like, what about a 1080 shove it? I don't think I've seen one that high. I might have seen a 900 shove it on like a hip or something like that, but I've never seen it go full 1080. In theory, you could do a 1080 shove it down a bunch of stairs. There's no, like, from a physics perspective, there's no reason why not. It'd be incredibly hard because you can't catch, like, if you pop the board that fast, you can't catch it dead. So, like, you'd have to catch it and it'd still be spinning slightly and it'll land perfectly straight, or straight enough to actually land with the board with having that much speed would be super tough. But we're not talking about difficulty. We're talking about if it's possible. And I think it would be possible to do something like that. If you just didn't have any fear in your head and you just push up to this gap and you just pop a 360 shove basically, but just refuse to catch it until the very last second, there's a non-zero chance you'd land something crazy. Not 900 shove, 1080 shove, 1260 shove, who knows? It's possible that you could do that from a physics perspective, but like the difficulty there is just being that precise, you know? But what tricks are really hard to do downstairs? I couldn't think of anything that could not be done. The biggest thing I could think of were tricks that you have to land or have to catch straight. Let's say like a plasma spin, for example, which wraps around your back foot. It's like a frontside big spin, but it wraps. And like you can't catch it, you know, like if you were to do a normal frontside big spin, you could pop it, you could catch it here and just, you know, slowly do the last spin as you clear the gap. But with the plasma spin, you can't just like, you can't catch it halfway and then finish the spin. The board does a full 360 and then you have the chance to catch it. That's just how the trick works. So like, if you have to catch it straight, how would you do it downstairs and absorb all that gap? I mean, it's possible, because the other example I came up with was a Chad Muska style frontside flip, and it flips like this, and then you catch it with both feet straight. You don't catch it halfway and pull it around. You catch it straight. Well, he did those downstairs all the time. And like you just kind of catch it, and maybe your body isn't spun the whole way. You know, you catch it kind of like this, and as you finish the gap, your shoulders catch up, but you're able to keep the board straight. So anything like that, where like if you spin and the board doesn't, like if you do a kick flip and you spin, you can catch it and just kind of like finish out the gap by keeping the board straight as you twist your body around. Like there's stuff that would be really awkward like that. There'd be things that'd be really difficult, but I don't think there's anything that could be done on flat that can't be done down a gap. We're not talking about like freestyle stuff, but like if you can roll, do a trick and land, there's no good reason other than fear and technical ability and precision that you can't do it downstairs. But yeah, if you're the kind of guy who's going to try stuff like that, you're going to try to do like a 540 kick flip, because you can do a backside flip. Why can't I do the same speed as a backside flip on flat, but just let it keep going as I go down all these stairs? If you're the kind of guy who's going to do that, you probably just get hurt and then you don't skate anymore, right? So there's stuff that we won't see because of that, but I don't think there's a physics reason why things couldn't be done down gaps. So that's it for now. If you have any questions of your own, go to radratvideo.com and you can submit them with the form on the homepage. If you like the channel, you can support it by hitting the join button. You can sponsor me on Patreon, or you can just subscribe and tell your friends about it. But that is all for this time. Thanks for hanging out.